So I did something controversial this weekend, something which got a lot of people upset, but something which I was very glad to do. And I wanted to tell you guys about this to give you some updates, kind of give you some clarity and what I think is the right way to move forward. Because this weekend I went to the Catholic Creators Conference and I got to talk to a lot of people both who are in front of the camera and some people who are behind the camera, and I found it to be very fruitful. And I think that we can actually have a lot of insight about what we should be doing right now. So I just wanted to share all of that with you. I wanted to be perfectly clear and honest with you because a lot of you might feel betrayed. A lot of you might feel like I have contradicted my own principles. And on the other hand, a lot of people might think that they have contradicted their principles and that they are having some duplicity with us. Okay. So I just wanted to go over everything, give you the background knowledge, be very clear with you. If any of you have questions, I want to be completely open and honest. Obviously, there are private details, private conversations that we can't really reveal. We don't want to do that. But I just want to be completely clear, open, and honest because I think this is a very big step forward for the future. And I think that we all can mutually benefit from this, and that the Catholic action that we all engage with can be strengthened from what we did this weekend. Okay. So, for those who aren't aware, there is a bit of a history that I have of critiquing what I call pop apologists or pop apologetics. So I don't know if this is a word which I invented. I don't think at least I did. I think that I got it from somebody else. But at least the reason that it's very commonly used in some circles is due to my influence. Because I saw some issues with how certain arguments were being presented by certain apologists. Sometimes I found the positions that they took on certain issues to be opportunistic. They were actually seeming to try to get around a lot of these issues and explain them in ways that are palatable. It's obviously okay to explain things in ways that are compelling, but a lot of my critiques were that they would try to discount what are historic teachings on certain doctrines, and they would discount this at the expense of a very solid orthodoxy. Okay. And there are many different instances of this that I could point to. Many of you are aware of the type of criticisms that I've given in the past. So, for example, purgatory. Purgatory was a huge thing. Now, and this is an important point to make, there are a lot of people within the Catholic Inc., Catholic Answers, pop apologist sphere, whatever you want to say. There are a lot of people that actually agree with what I said and agree with the line of critique. But as an example, when it comes to purgatory, there is a certain line of apologetics within purgatory that completely discounts legal aspects to purgatory. And the discounting of legal aspects of purgatory is against what is traditional when it comes to Catholic teaching on purgatory. And the reason I brought these up wasn't because this was some sort of subtle theological point that only the most terminally online scholastic readers would be interested in. It's actually because a lot of these points of Catholic theology have a great degree of import into the Catholic life, right? So when it comes to purgatory, in particular, and the point that I brought up about purgatory, this makes sense out of suffrages for the dead, masses for the dead, prayers for the dead. This makes sense out of a lot of our teaching on soteriology, so our theology of justification. This makes sense out of a lot of the instances of indulgences. Caring for indulgences is shaped by this. So if you have a super involved and intricate understanding of this legal aspect of purgatory, you are very zealous for certain spiritual points. So vice versa, if these things are not emphasized, then that actually changes the way in which one lives the Catholic life. So these aren't merely subtle points. I find these to be quite important. Now, this, of course, is not to say that everything from Catholic Answers is like this. I've never said that. There are certain individuals within Catholic Answers who actually agree with the point that I made. They actually agree with emphasizing this aspect of purgatory. And it's not necessarily to say that it's everything that Catholic Answers produces. I've always said that they produce a lot of good things and that I myself on occasion will recommend different things that Catholic Answers produces to friends or families. If I want something of a simple article, simple video, simple answer to a question that people have, I actually think that they've done a great degree of good. And I've always emphasized this. So the question is, from this sort of background of being very critical of Catholic Answers and different articles or videos or ideas that are generally held, how did it go from that sort of hostility, if you want to phrase it like that hostility to actually me going to a conference where there were people who were perhaps involved in Catholic Answers, or at least within their sort of general sphere of influence, the sort of Catholic Inc. idea? How did it go from that to these friendly interactions that I had? A lot of people might say that maybe I capitulated, or maybe they capitulated, or something like that. But actually, the truth is much better than either of those two options. The truth is something that is going to be very helpful for everybody involved in the future. Okay. So the beginning of understanding how this panned out and how I actually traveled to Steubenville for this is begun with a few friendships that I had forged in the last year with some individuals who were broadly within that circle. Okay. So I'd forged these friendships, for example, with Kyle, with Franco, etc. And then the voice of reason situation happened. I promise this is connected. This may be a really weird thing to bring up in this sort of video, but the voice of reason situation happened around a month ago, I think. So the fall with Voice of Reason occurred, and there were some people within this Catholic influencer space that were unfairly involved within the charges for Voice of Reason and Wretched Saints. So I talked to some of the individuals who I was friends with within this sphere, and I asked them what was going on. I wanted to know whether these other Catholic influencers were involved in this situation, because that is obviously important information for me to know, right? So I talked with them, and I found out that when it comes to every single individual who's being accused of having this knowledge of the situation beforehand, or having this secret collaboration or cover up or whatever it may be, these individuals were completely innocent. They had not done anything wrong. So I decided, as a move of goodwill, that I would actually reach out to some of the people within my sphere who were spreading some of these ideas, these false notions. And I asked them, hey, could you retract this? Could you clarify? Could you make sure that people know that this is actually not true? Because it started to spread pretty widely. And I didn't want anybody who was innocent of this situation to be unfairly included, right? So I did this about a month ago, and that show of goodwill actually went pretty far in establishing a friendly relationship between me and some of the other individuals within this group of Catholic Inc., right? So, what I decided to do in order to strengthen these relationships, in order to actually discuss some of the difficulties and issues that we may have with one another, I decided to take up the invitation to go to the Catholic Creators Conference. I'd originally rejected the invitation for a number of different reasons, but I decided to change my mind and just kind of go up for the weekend, hang out, discuss, and talk about a number of different events. And this was actually before I was even invited to the Gazan live stream. So that just happened to be an afterthought. It was already established that I was going to go to Steubenville to hang out at the event. So I got there on Friday, and I got to meet everyone. And almost immediately, I was confronted. There's this sort of idea that perhaps we just kind of maybe glossed over all of our differences, or pretended that they didn't exist, or maybe I just capitulated or they capitulated or something like this. But that's not what happened. Actually, I showed up. We went to Chesterton's. I went down to the basements of Chesterton's, and I was confronted. Okay, I was confronted. There were questions of my conduct at certain points throughout the history of my channel, differences that they had with me on different issues, etc. So there was direct confrontation, and the confrontation wasn't about the issues that you probably think they're about, right? A lot of people probably think that They came up to me and said, "Hey, you said this mean joke, right? You said these off-color jokes that we don't like, or perhaps, oh, we disagree with you about these different theological topics, or something like that." That's not at all how it went, right? Some of them actually said that they happened to listen to some of the criticisms that I had, and they thought it was fair criticism. They actually thought it was fair criticism and think that we could move forward in a sort of dialogue about these different issues. When it comes to the jokes, there's this sort of idea that we're not allowed to joke about things. If you make a Gen Z style entertaining, edgy joke, that people are going to get upset at you. That's not really the case at all. There's a lot of these misconceptions, but we had this confrontation, disagreed about things, were honest. I was willing to admit my wrong where I was wrong, and they were willing to admit when I made fair points about different issues in the past. So throughout the weekends, many of these different issues were brought up. We discussed them, and we came to a lot of agreement. Not with everything, of course, but a lot of agreement was reached. And this kind of made me realize that there should be at least a new doctrine about the way in which we approach these issues in the future. There's a difference between somebody who is, on the one hand, tribalistic, and on the other hand, another person who is ideological. A person who's tribalistic cares about a certain title, a certain label, a certain name. So if you go out of bounds to critique, or perhaps you ally yourselves with people, then the people who are tribalistic, they're going to freak out. They're not going to care. They're going to stifle any sort of movement forward. It's a very stagnant idea to be within tribalism. But on the other hand, it is completely different to be ideological. At my best moments, and I hope this is very often, I'm an ideologue. I care about the ideas, the fundamental ideas that I presented. The critiques that I presented, I believe, remain perpetually relevant. And I actually think that a lot of people within the Catholic Inc. sphere agree with me. They agree that a lot of my critiques are fair, and they're willing to hear out my critiques. And because I am an ideologue and not a tribalist, I don't really care about joining arms with them. We can discuss these critiques and we can forge a way forward. And I equally am willing to hear out the critiques that they may have of me. So, what I want to encourage everyone else to continue on with is continue on with being an ideologue. Care about our ideas moving forward more than you care about teaming up with people that you may find cringe. That's not what's important, okay? All that I mean to say with all of this detail and with this statement that clarifies all of these points is that we have to always be moving forward. We have to move forward with those fundamental ideas that I believe are relevant, and we ought to press these forward. But the way in which we do that is going to differ, right? And the way in which we do that not only ought to differ in different circumstances and situations, but the way that we do that ought not to be the reason why people don't hear us. And I think that's a very valid critique that a lot of people brought forward to me this weekend. They said that my ideas are very relevant. A lot of my ideas are very good. A lot of what I bring forward is very convincing. But a lot of people aren't willing to hear what I have to say because of the way or the manner in which I said them. And that's actually a tragedy, right? Because if I truly believe in the ideas that I say, I ought to make the barrier as low as possible, right? I don't want somebody to disagree with me off the bat just because they didn't like the way I said something. And what's important is that the people who are within these spheres are now more than ever, more than a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they're right now at a moment where they're willing to listen to a lot of the ideas that we have to say. So, what I want to encourage a lot of you to do is to be an ideologue, is to think about what is the best way for us to move forward in the plan, to trust the plan, move forward in the plan, and to continue pushing a lot of those ideas that we think are most important in having people love Jesus Christ and to remain faithful to the Catholic Church. Okay? I hope that a lot of you guys take what I have to say to heart. Let's get beyond a lot of the memes, which are awesome, of course, and let's get actually to the substantial action that we're engaging in that we think is best for the life of the church. That's all that I have for you. As always, God bless.